My name is Stephanie Esquivius. I'm with ServiceNow, and I'm here to introduce our next speaker. This presentation is Integrating Service Portal with Amazon Lex with John Benedetti. And let's welcome John.
Setting that bar awful high for me. So, let me bring the slides up here. That is not my slide. These are my slides. Like Stephanie said, thank you, Stephanie. The title of the presentation is Integrating Service Portal with Amazon Lex. How many people are using AWS? Using AWS, okay. This came during a time when the company I was with was really making a push towards utilizing AWS, pretty much any part of the platform we could take advantage of. They encouraged us to go in our own time and take a look at the platform, experiment, tinker, try new things. This is basically the results of one of those little experiments. I got the idea by attending a local dev group in Wichita. I'm actually based out of Wichita, called Dev ICT. And one of the people from Wichita State, go Shocks, came by to give a presentation on Lex. Now, Lex is basically the root component of Amazon's Alexa service. And what you do is you build chatbots, which are basically APIs. I'm going to go into detail on that later, to respond to user input. And this is enabled via text or voice, at least in the native interface. But I wasn't able to get the voice working, but I do have the text working. It is a goal, basically, to get voice working on the front end on Service Portal. I think that would be a huge win. And then the other key takeaway that I'm hoping will provide value for anybody using AWS is being able to get the access to the entire SDK on the Service Portal. So if you're used to using the command line interface to work with AWS, if you have existing code or scripts and you want to integrate them into widgets on the Service Portal or into your workflows, this should help you do it. So it's not just about the chatbot. The chatbot was basically a means to an end. Again, my name is John Benedetti. I currently work for Alexander Open Systems, recently bought by Converge One, and we rebadged last week. My contact information is still current and will still forward. You'll have that at the end of the session. I've been in the ServiceNow platform for a little over 4 years. I've spent a total of 20 years in IT. Moving to Alexander Open Systems was a good move for me, specifically because they specialize in cross-domain implementation. So it's not just one platform or another. We can bring an entire team of people who are experts in their individual area and be able to deliver an entire solution. So when we're talking about working with SSO, we already have someone who might have gotten them on AD Azure ahead of time, and then I come in and get their service now integrated with that and password reset, things like that. Let's see. The other thing I like to do is basically make disparate systems, two different things work together and do something. And so this. Again, I work for Alexander Open Systems. The service management practice is fairly new. We've been working for about 3 to 4 years, I think, in that space. Their main history, though, is in hardware, data center expertise, networking. They have a large Microsoft division. Again, what I wanted to talk about and what I hope, my main goal and my main hope here is to make sure that you come away with something. Again, this is just a little spare time experiment. It seemed interesting enough that ServiceNow wanted it presented here, and I hope you agree. Again, at the time when I first started looking at this, we had a lot of pressure towards automation, meaning submitting a request in the portal, having stuff happen automatically on the back end. We were coming up with new vectors to individual or to get customers in touch with first responders. This is basically the next logical step, is automating that front end. ServiceNow has been talking a lot about virtual agents. We saw a great presentation this morning about integrated chatbots. If you don't want to wait for Madrid, this might be a good way to go. What I am going to show you is how to build a chatbot inside of AWS, and then how to actually get it integrated into the service portal. And we'll go ahead and do a live demo. And then, when we're done here, hopefully you'll be able to think of examples, not necessarily even just for virtual agents, but for other ways you could utilize a direct integration into AWS. So I'm going to start with the chatbot. Again, I describe the chatbot as an API. They basically have a single web service endpoint that you can integrate with, send commands to, and then it will respond. Let's see. And like I was saying, basically you want to, before you really dive into the spaces, see if you have any heavy hitters. So if you are checking your metrics on the request module and seeing things that are handled manually, or your first responders, if they're taking a lot of the same calls over and over again, these are always, from a business perspective, these are things that you might want to look at automating. Again, automation, case deflection, self-service, allowing people to not necessarily have to get on the phone with somebody, deal with having to repeat themselves on the phone. You have a chat interface. Maybe you have live agents that can respond. But if you have some very easy things that you can get a response to, that's where a virtual agent will come in. And also, another main driver for this was leadership pushing towards, we want to go to the cloud. We want to retire our on-prem resources. Whichever framework that you're trying to do that in, the general vision is, we don't want to own this stuff anymore, we want to go to a SaaS solution. And this is one of the avenues for it. So I'll move over at this point to showing you the actual Lex chatbot. It's made up of a couple of components. You have a major or a top-level API that has a dedicated name. So that's your API endpoint. And then there will be individual intents. You could think of them as methods. And then you have your slots, which are subsets of your intents. Those are your arguments for the methods. There we go. All of this is set up in a scoped app. So if any of you have your PDIs, you can log into this endpoint. My GitHub account name is Benedetti Tech, all one word. And the name of the experiment is Snow Lex Experiment. This is publicly available. You can log in and grab the code and do whatever you want with it. You will need this piece, though. I'm already logged into Amazon or AWS on the Lex interface, and I already have a pre-built bot. This is the one that I did for the original experiment. You can see the create date was July of last year. What kind of inspired taking this approach? You're probably going to laugh when you actually see what the method does. This bot allows you to order jelly beans. And the reason for that is, this was our summer vacation. I'm originally from California, and we try to take a trip back to visit family every couple of years. Every time we go back to Northern California, anybody who's familiar with it, in Fairfield or Sassoon City is where the Jelly Belly factory is. And my kids always want to go there every single time. Doesn't matter how many times they've been there, they always want to go back. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this chatbot? I went to that dev group in June, and I was like, I should just have it order jelly. So here we are. So again, Benedetti Tech Bot is the top-level API name. So it's your service name. Inside of that, you have your intents. These are your methods. Very simple and descriptive. I want a jelly bean. Name it what it does. And what you have are the sample utterances. Again, this can be voice or text. And these are the different types of keywords that will trigger or invoke the method, so the intent. Basically, the bot, based on what you're telling it, is trying to gauge your intent. So this one will activate if I get something that matches or is close to this. and should come back with some questions. And the questions are going to be prompts to fill out the arguments. These are your slots. And then there is, basically it's a prompt. If it picks up that you want a jelly bean, it's going to ask what flavor you want. And then it responds in plain text what flavor of jelly bean. Depending on your response, it will confirm. So here's the confirmation. When all the slots are filled out, it's basically confirming with you, is it okay to execute? Is it okay to actually execute and complete the transaction? If you say yes, it will actually execute. I'm returning the parameters to the client, and this will matter later because the idea is if they say yes and you get a completed order, it's going to tell you all the slots. So if you have a service portal or a service catalog form with these various fields, if you work them through a chat session to get the answers to these and it comes back, you can just trigger that workflow. You can trigger that catalog item at that point. They don't have to fill out a form. They don't have to worry about the UI. They're basically just, they can be typing on their phone. They can be typing on their computer. And I had a little, if you say no after filling out the order, it says final myself. That's it for that piece. Okay. So this is the basic flow. I don't know if you can read that. Will the slides be available afterwards? Okay. This is basically a visual flow of what actually happens once you get into the portal. So the customer logs in at the beginning, and then it'll prompt them for information. This is basically, the API is invoked, but it doesn't know what intent you have. You could have multiple intents, or you could have different endpoints with different bots. It really depends on how you want to go. So it's going to prompt you for information. If it tells you something suitable to one of its intents, it's going to pick up on that and then work on filling out the slots. So it moves down here to, does the text match any of the intents? If it does, then it's going to prompt for each slot. It has to be a valid response in each one. And then eventually, when it gets done, it's going to prompt for that confirmation. So the other part of this experiment was just learning how to build scoped applications and put them into GitHub for public consumption. The elements of the widget code is an HTML template. It's very basic. It's an input field and a click event. But then the client side, this is one of the key points. It actually pulls in the AWS SDK, the entire thing. So we're doing a JS include. It's something newer in Studio and something I hadn't actually tried to use before until doing this experiment. But we have so many, when we're doing so many different integrations with third parties, of course you want to pull their library in if you really need. Yes, you probably could port the code and put it server side. Eventually you might, or just get a small piece of it, whatever you need, a custom library. But again, this was just for the purposes of this experiment. And then the server side actually picks up the application parameters. So there's an initialization piece where we're taking system parameters, which are your app level keys and the URL for your bot, the region that you're in for AWS, basically everything you need to get that client up and running. Okay, I'm going to show you that piece now. We can stop in the middle for questions too. Any questions so far? I'm kind of, sir. Okay, the answer was, or the question was, you could take a multitude of different bots and put them on the portal and they can listen for different keywords. The answer is yes. You could pass these to your entire library of bots and see which one picks up on it. That's something that's possible, but I just didn't scale out to that. So it's one-to-one, but it's something definitely you could do. Sir. I'm sure you can. The question was, is do you have to build all the intents and the slots manually? I'm sure you can script anything you want. And you could put some kind of, some kind of a loop or have it be dynamic, but it does have to be there waiting. If you wanted to script things or come up with some kind of bot builder, that would be pretty easy to do. Anyone else? Sir. I'm not quite sure I heard the question. Let me come on down. Oh, thanks, Stefan. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I haven't tried it. I can try and find out. From the way this service was explained to me, it is actually a root of Alexa. So Alexa is based on this. So I'm sure you could either roll your own, if you wanted to have your own Alexa type service that encapsulated your own bots, and we're able to gauge those intents. And it does apply AI, and it learns based on what people said previously and then what they actually meant. So Lex is a root. Basically, it's a dependency of Alexa. So Alexa is a wrapper for a whole lot of bots that are based on Lex. Mm-hmm. Sure. Sir. The question was, can you use multiple languages in the same bot? I'm sure you can. I haven't experimented with that, but again, it's a global service. You could probably do localization to where it prefers one or the other, but I don't know. It's an interesting thing to try. Anything else? I'm going to show you guys the actual ServiceNow code. Okay. So this is the studio interface. Scroll this out a little bit. So we have 6 system properties, the actual bot name, the ID and secret. There's a username that's associated with a role in IAM, so you do have to provision a user. The user has to have the access to run bots. And then you have your region, and then you have like your app keys. So it is app level authentication. You should be able to pick up things from the client that help identify the user so that you could have a more personalized experience. But again, this is just a very simple experiment. I built a whole portal. It probably wasn't necessary. I just wanted to try it out. But this is the actual portal configuration. What I'm going to show you and where the meat really is the widget. So like I said, the HTML template, it has a title. It has, a CData object that it's modeled to, that it uses to pass messages back and forth. And then it has an event handler. And then it also, and this was more pseudo debugging for me. It's basically keeping track of what you said last. That way you know where you are in the invocation in case there's any kind of lag. Then you have your server script that initializes those system properties that I showed you in the studio. This is what's necessary to actually get the bot up and running. Once those are actually configured inside of, you basically build your bot, you get your user with the role, you get the keys, you put it inside of the app, and then you're ready to go. Not what show you the actual client side part of the widget. So when we initialize those system properties, this is going through and actually building the credentials. So it's initializing a credentials object. Oh, that is one thing I forgot to show you. The actual library integration, the JS include, which is defining the entire library as the object AWS. So just like you're using any of the Glide libraries, I put it in as a global object. So you can use it anywhere in the system. And it's really that simple. It's mapped to a URL, it loads it, and I put it as an include on the actual page itself. But you could really invoke it anywhere. So it's calling AWS, it's using the credentials method, it's building the authentication out of the ID and the secret, then actually pulling up the Lex runtime method and throwing in the credentials object, putting in the endpoint, which is the URL that we put in as our system parameter. Same thing with the region. Those are all initialized. And then this is the actual talk to bot function, which is invoked when you click the talk to bot button. So see talk to bot. It's using the objects that it already has, and it's sending the message, and it's updating the data model as it goes. A little bit of console logging so we can see what's actually exposed on the front end. And this is how it actually works. So when you initialize, comes up, we've got a message saying Lex is standing. So I'm going to tell it I'm hungry. So this goes back to your question about could we intuit multiple different bots. If I'm hungry, maybe it gets down to a subset of bots. It really depends on how you're going to wrap them. So I'm telling it I'm hungry. We've got the transaction. It should come back and actually prompt and ask me what flavor I want. It's normally not this slow. When I test it from home, it's generally very fast. But I think this might have something to do with the wireless and the shared connection. So it's asking me what flavor of Jelly Bean I would like. Now, this is either everybody's favorite flavor from Jelly Belly or they absolutely loathe it. Popcorn. It's one of my favorites. I hear a lot of oohs and I hear a lot of yums. So, are you sure you want a popcorn jelly bean? Everybody who said ew, we don't need you to speak up right away, but if I say yes, it's going to prompt and say that the order is completed. So the idea is, and can you see this okay? Do I need to zoom in? Zoom in? Okay. Better? You see that okay? I probably could have put some contrast or something in there. So you have successfully ordered. So this is going to be the confirmation to the user that they've finished their order. So it's trying to make everything transparent. But what we have on the back end in the data model is we know what intent was triggered. The dialog state is ready for fulfillment. We have these various states that we can pick up, and we can do different actions based on that. When it's ready for fulfillment, we have all the slots available locally. And what we could do is do a server-side push with a catalog item that matches that intent with all the variables in place. So it's a different experience. Depending on your customer base's appetites for virtual agents, if you want to have your call center focusing on things that are actual emergencies instead of getting people jelly beans, it was really more about getting the proof of concept in place and saying we can do whatever we want with AWS through. Any questions on this piece? Oh, please. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, so it will pick up, basically you're gonna, instead of defining your fields, you're going to define the catalog, but maybe it's not public. Maybe it's, something that you don't want cluttering up your catalog. I mean, catalogs get so huge, and sometimes there's duplication. But if you have something that's a heavy hitter and you want the bot to try first, you build out your library. The virtual bot tries to help them first, and if they can't, then they can browse or they can chat with a live agent. But yeah, what it comes back here is, you see where it says slots in the data object? It's picked up the flavor popcorn and then the intent. So the intent would be your catalog item. And then the flavor, and any other slots that you had would be your variable. Yeah, you don't necessarily fulfill it in Lex, but Lex is basically passing it back. And then you can push this via a server-side call to just say, let's go start this function and get our catalog item going. Yep. Anything else? Sir? Yeah. Yes. The Lexbot, okay, so the question was, is all of this available on GitHub? The ServiceNow piece is available. What you will need to do is provision an AWS account. All of this is available in the free service. So if you're just starting out and experimenting, I think the transaction cost is, you get 10,000 calls a month for free, and then it's a quarter for another lot. So it's basically, if you're using something like Lambda a lot, it's gonna fit in alongside that type of a service and that price. But yeah, you will need to go out to AWS and build the bot yourself, but it is straightforward. And then those various parameters that I gave are going to be plugged into the system properties, and all of this is in the README. And then I also have several blog posts that cover this. I'll link to it. There was another. I don't know. So the question was, can the slots be dynamic? I would say you could make them more open-ended. You could probably, if you knew 3 to 5 high-level pieces of information that you could use to guess what they wanted, you could do that. The only thing that I've experimented with is tying this one-to-one with an intent to a catalog item. So you would need to have your bot match up with that, and you would need, of course, to refactor it as your catalog item changed. But to your point, you could probably sync that on the back end with another script call. So if you wanted to build some kind of wireframe in between your catalog and your bots, that would be one. Sir? So the question was if you wanted to use the bot to search for records within ServiceNow. I would have to think through that. The key here is the bot by default wouldn't have any visibility into your into your database, into your ServiceNow data. But it could prompt and facilitate the responses for those questions. If you needed to basically map things from a bot as well as things locally, there are ways to. But I haven't gotten that complex. Yes? Okay, right. You would have to, the function would basically have to call back. So the question was, or the statement was about having implemented this using Alexa. But of course, you do have to build out the plumbing to call back into the system. So you could, but you would have to build that interface back in. This piece here is just essentially designed for filling out a catalog item. So as far as doing any kind of searches or updates, I'm sure it's possible. But then you have to solve the issues of how do we get access to the ServiceNow data through the AWS service, and what's an optimal. I think I'm going to finish up. I'm running out of time, and then we can just go straight to Q&A. So again, all of the code in ServiceNow for this is in a scoped app. It's freely available on GitHub. The idea is to help people know where to get started, to see basically what's possible. When you get a challenge from leadership to go to the cloud, to use AWS, we have $1 million worth of credits that we need to go use, where they're trying to get us as a customer. How do we take advantage of that? And it's like, you can go get lost in the docs all that you want. But this basically just gives you a little step stool, a little push in the right direction. It makes things simpler so that you can focus on solving business problems instead of learning about the tools to build the tool when you're really on a time crunch. The questions about what you could use this for, we've got several examples from the questions as far as what the potential is. The original vision for me was for to fulfill service request items. But again, if you wanted to update records, if you wanted to look up records, if you wanted to facilitate orchestration or discovery, if you wanted to respond to a notification, it's probably easier to send a text message, but it is possible. So that was the question, is are you ready to actually do automation at the front end in your service catalog? Start off with your request items, do a search, see which ones are coming through the most, see if it's worthwhile to actually put together a bot or any kind of an automation for that. And what is the business value going to be for that? Are you going to save time with your first responders? Are you going to get a quicker turnaround time? Are you going to get better survey scores on your experience? Those are all things that your org should be asking itself. So if we go back to put our ITIL hats on for a bit, automation is the natural end result of requests. Requests are repeatable tasks. They can be scripted, they can be put into a script. Eventually, we should let the bots do it for us, and we can focus on things that are actually complex work. Unattended chat is going to be a part of your service desk. Within the next 6 months to a year, with what ServiceNow is promising to release, virtual agents are going to be standard. So this is something that, even if you're not ready to commit to something like this now, it is something that will be part of your catalog. Here is my contact information. I'm on LinkedIn. There's my blog link. The email will still work. It is my AOS email, but it'll forward to my Converge one. I invite anybody to reach out if you have questions on this. I'd like to hear from you. I think we're ready to move on to Q&A. I know we had a few. If there are any questions. Ma'am?
No.
Your front row service. Sure. Okay, so the voice part, the question was, did I do anything for the voice part of Amazon Lex? I have not brought that forward to the service portal, so there's nothing in ServiceNow yet that supports voice integration with Lex. But when you're actually testing and building your bot, you can use voice. You would need to bring, you would either need to invoke and take control of the user's audio. So the audio output, the audio input, you would need to be able to get input from that, which is another reason for keeping the SDK client side. So you would need to have access to that, and you would need to grant permission. It's a great idea. I just haven't tried. Oh. Oh. Thanks, Steph. Anybody, ma'am? Oh.
Knowing what you know about Madrid coming out, would you do it this way again?
I watched the keynote this morning, and it was like, wow, they already did something pretty much 10 times better than this. Like I said, the temptation might be to wait for Madrid. One thing that I would say is that there are providers that sell solutions like this. If it's part of the native platform and it were guaranteed to be free, I'd probably wait. But again, this is a low-level integration with the service that doesn't cost you a dime. You're basically paying for the Lex transactions, and that's it, and then your time spent. So if you wanted to go this way today, I'd say I don't know that there are a whole lot of options. And also the added value of having direct access to the entire SDK and not just Lex, it really opens up a lot of potential. So the short answer to your question is probably not. But then, I don't know, if we only focused on, I tried not to think about whether or not it was a solved problem. It was just something I wanted to do to learn. Sir.
So how does it play well or connect chat or?
What were those two products?
Connect chat.
Oh, Connect Chat. Sorry, I thought you said Next Chat. I missed that. I have not tried to have Connect work with it. As far as having like a virtual agent or machine language behind that chat, I mean, you can connect to a live agent, and of course they can ask all the questions. You can always have your SME or your super user sitting desk side with someone who really is maybe tech phobic and not wanting to go through the portal. It's basically the same experience. This is just a way to free up time for your first responders. Sir. I haven't checked much into that. You are connecting as a service to Lex via API call. So unless ServiceNow is passing client information back through the API calls you're basically not sending any identifying information to Lex, at least in the methods that I'm calling. If there's anything implied by invoking the AWS runtime from that client, I'd probably need to look into it. Mm-hmm. It could. So if you put a credit card number in there, there's nothing preventing it. But you could do that anyway. You can type a credit card number into Google. It does learn from it, so I would assume that the data is captured. I don't know for how long. But the bots are intended to learn based on previous chats. So yeah. Anyone else? Sir. This is Kingston. So I built it on Jakarta and updated it to Kingston. So it's current. Well, thanks again for your time. Oh, no. Go ahead, please. No, it's all right. Sorry.
I was just going to ask about, you log any misses you have so that you yourself could go back in the slots?
You certainly could. You're capturing all of that. So the question was, are you capturing misses or maybe disconnects? Of course you can. So you have a session, if you disconnect, if the bot was invoked, you'll know it was dropped. You can log that information and you can run metrics on it and decide on a course of action. Don't want to cut anyone else off if anyone else has questions. Say going once. All right. Thanks again.
Thank you, John.